Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston of Tellstone, Israel. I'm sorry I'm in the dark. I'm not getting my lighting quite bright tonight, so it's not going to be on for long anyway. We just want you to know that we're happy to have you back. If you have any questions, I do have private chats that I'll have available. You can chat through the Israel websites or bring them home. What am I saying? Bring them home. YouTube Israel.Torah.com. That's where you can watch us live. You can also watch us live on Facebook Live on Josh Wander's page. And I'm representing the Miriam Project Geula Hour. That's also on Facebook Live right now. And just don't forget to go to Rabbi Winston's website, which he doesn't seem to have up today.
Where is it?
There you go. Why don't you have your website up, Rabbi?
I didn't do anything.
There it is. I'll put it up for you.
Okay.
Here we are. Hold on. I don't want to hold it up, but here we are. That's funny. 36.org. It should be right here. 36.org. It's underneath me. Okay. It's not underneath the rabbi, but 36.org is the website you want to go to read Rabbi Pinchas Winston's plethora of works and essays and webinars and books and everything that he has to offer about every possible topic of Jewish history and Jewish life and the Geula Shalema, which is, of course, what we're here to hear tonight. We are all here to hear tonight. Thank you, Rabbi. Please.
Well, not everything about Jewish history, just some very important, pertinent points to do with the topic of Geula and life in general. But there's a lot to talk about. Coming off Hanukkah, and I hope it was a good Hanukkah for everybody. So it's appropriate, I guess, to talk about the light after the darkness. And you have to understand that what's going on in these weekly Torah readings, going back to the beginning of the story of Yosef and his brothers, Yaakov Avinu, and all that's been going on, and on the surface of it, it's a story. It's a story of sibling rivalry, and not just with Yosef and his brothers, but it goes back to Yaakov and Esav and Yishmael and Yitzchak, and all the way back to Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, at the beginning, right? Sibling rivalry and jealousy seems to be a common thread throughout, even with the Imohot, Rachel and Leah. We see jealousy showing up there as well. And, it's very easy, especially in our generation, to take things superficially and just read it the way it is and assume that's all there is to know. Of course, if you see the Medrash, you learn the Medrash, and the Medrash tells you a lot of details that are not in the Chumash itself. But it's interesting because also if you notice that the stories seem very, very brief and very emotionless, and we just so many years in a row, I just read the story of Joseph being put in the pit and sold to Egypt. You feel bad, but you know how it ends. First of all, Baruch Hashem, so you feel better about it. But nonetheless, it's like it should evoke emotions every year, which you try to recall what it must have been like. But we don't do that because the Torah doesn't share that with us. Yosef is being taken by his brothers back in Parshas Vayeshev, and they're throwing him in a pit. They're judging him with a Sanhedrin that they put together, guilty of death, and he thinks he's going to be killed at first. And they put him in the pit. And they decide not to kill him and sell him instead down to Egypt. And it's not like Egypt of today, where you can go down to Egypt, take a plane back or a bus back, and as far as it is, it's a couple hours away. In those days, it was a long camel ride or donkey ride, and it was very far away, very disconnected. Communication was almost impossible. And it must have been a terrifying experience beyond imagination. But not just that. Yosef, as much as he would be concerned about himself, he was also probably more concerned about his father, how he knew his father was very close to him, and how it would affect his father, especially since he understood that his father looked at the building of the 12 tribes, not so much as just having a large family, but this was the beginning of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, the rectification of creation, and all the history was all about. As Rashi points out, based upon the Medrash, that one of the reasons why Yaakov is so upset, aside from the fact that he, as a father losing a son, but it also meant that his mission was destroyed, because he needed all 12 sons to survive and to live. If he died with all 12 sons alive and still on the same page, then everything went well. But for the longest time, it looked like that was not the case. He already lost Yosef, then eventually Shimon, and possibly Binyamin when they go down in last week's Parsha. And he was very, very distraught. And Yosef would have been very, very concerned about that, extremely concerned about that. Maybe he'd kill his father. God, he wasn't a young man. anymore. As you see in this week's parsha, he complains to Paro that I'm only 130 years of age, and look at me, I'm worn. Paro, how old are you? He's worn down with all that he had to go through. He was worn down, and he didn't live as long as his grandfather Avraham or his father Yitzchak. He died after at 147 years of age, much less than his father, who lived until 180. So you don't know. And Yosef would have been concerned, but if you look at the parsha, you don't hear a thing, nothing. It doesn't. And Yosef screamed, and he cried out for mercy, and his brothers didn't pay attention to him, and he was like, "Please don't do it. Please don't do it. What about our father? What about you?" Nothing. It's almost as if either Yosef was, anesthetized. That's the word, right? Or he was acquiesced. Okay, fine. I don't like it, but you got to sell me, so I'll go down. That's what it seems like. You only begin to hear what actually happened emotionally at the end of last week's parsha, when Yosef finally catches them, or they get found with the cup, and they brought back, and they realize they're being set up, and they realize it's all a hoax, and it's just whoever's responsible, but for sure God's responsible, and it seemed like God was collecting his debt, as I think it was Reuben who says it, right? Meaning that they sold Joseph and didn't make amends, and didn't fix up the situation, and now the debtor was saying, I'm taking my payment back right now through you at the situation right now. And then you hear them say, all because we didn't listen to the boy when he cried. We didn't listen to Joseph when he cried out. Oh, he did cry out. He did plead. So why don't we hear that back in Parshat Vayeshev? Because they didn't hear it. Even though he was doing it, they didn't hear it. They believed that he was guilty. They believed that he was chayav misa, meaning he had to suffer the capital punishment because he was doing things that they thought were dangerous for the future of the Jewish people. And this takes some background information, but they weren't so wrong in a lot of respects, but they were wrong overall, clearly. But it was all means to get them down to Egypt and set them up for the rise to power. And as he says in this week's parsha, to the brothers, clearly, you didn't send me down here. You did, but you didn't. God did it. God arranged the whole, it's clear now. He arranged the whole thing. And I came down. So the Torah doesn't really provide us with the emotions. And likewise in this week's parsha too. When Yosef finally, the great reveal, right? He pulls off the mask and says, Ani Yosef, is my father still alive? And of course the brothers are all shocked. And we're all going, why they're shocked, because they cannot believe that Yosef is viceroy of Egypt. They can't believe his dreams came true, despite what they tried to do to stop them. They can't believe that he was right about everything he was saying, and that they were wrong for 22 years of their life, and all that they were doing and all that they were thinking that they were accomplishing was for naught. They were just pawns in a game that they thought they were masters of. And that's shocking. That would shock anybody. It's like going through, person goes through college for 6 years, gets a degree, and they cancel the job. They cancel the whole profession. It no longer exists anymore. You can't be hired. And it's like, what? It's like, it's beyond shock. You're speechless. I'm probably not speechless. And even you are speechless at first. That's just at the beginning. But after a while of being speechless and things start to catch up to you, and you start to put the pieces together, and you start to backtrack and think, right? Eventually, all that turns into anger and resentment. And at some point in time, it wouldn't be surprising to hear that the brothers said, okay, we get the message, but how could you do a thing like this? Do you understand what you caused us? First of all, for not communicating for 22 years with Abba and the family, making it look like you were dead or gone and disappeared, and even, we're responsible. We came to apologize. We came to redeem you. We came to find you. We came to make amends. We were wrong. We admit it. Nevertheless, when did two wrongs ever make a right? To do all this, and not just to us, by the way, but we went back to our father, your father, and we told him the story, and it caused him such consternation, agmas nefesh, and difficult, and then you insist upon bringing back Binyamin, knowing what that must have caused your father to feel the time. Like, what were you thinking? Even though, Baruch Hashem, it's all happily ever after right now. What were you thinking? Torah doesn't present that. It doesn't tell us that. And as a result, no one thinks about it. We just like, okay, the brothers must have said, wow, now we see what's going on. It all makes sense now. And boy, are you ever right and we ever wrong? Okay, let's move on to the next scene. That's the way it seems. Maybe that's what it was. But the Torah doesn't present it because basically it leaves it to us. Just this, the same way, for example, on Shabbos morning, and during the week, Shabbos afternoon, Monday, Thursdays, and holidays, we read from the Sefer Torah in public. And the Sefer Torah is a very curious thing. Why? Because we are so medactic, so exact about how you have to pronounce the word, that people will yell out in the middle of a Kriyas Torah to correct the Baal Korah if he makes a mistake. It makes a difference. Even, not every mistake is a mistake that you have to stop them, but most mistakes. Certainly if a word is skipped or mispronounced and has the wrong meaning, we stop them. We're very careful about how we read Torah, the word of God. Aside from respect, it also teaches us about life. You need to know the truth. And yet, a Sefer Torah has no vowels. It's got notes, but they're not written there. You have to memorize them. So we're totally dependent upon the Baal Korah, and I'm always in awe of Baal Korahs who can go up there and lane parsha after parsha after parsha. And they say it gets easy as you get, as you go on, but it's still a tremendous talent and responsibility to go up there and read from a Sefer Torah clearly all the words, get them right, get the flow, get the notes, everything correctly. But the question really remains, why take the chance? If anything should require to have the vowels put in and the notes put in, it's a Sefer Torah because it matters. A physics book, not such a big deal, okay? Or a mathematics book, or even Gemara, to some degree, you can get by if you mispronounce the words, okay, you need to be accurate. There's no question about that. You can make a mistake in halacha too, but not like a Sefer Torah. So why would we have a mitzvah to read a Sefer Torah like that and read from it in public, and to be fulfilled, the mitzvah has to be like this, if it's such a precarious thing to do? And the answer is because God says to us, I want you to contribute to the shleimus of Torah, of the Kriya. I want you to participate in that. I could give the whole thing to you, and all you have to do is read it. Now would also be a level of participation, but you have to put your soul into it too. And one of the ways you do that is by having to memorize it and having to think about it and have havana and kavana as you read it. Because God wants partners. He didn't make a huge, massive human zoo to watch us how we're going to act and the things we're going to accomplish. He didn't just simply put it all together and go away. He made the world to give us the opportunity to be partners with him in the completion of creation. And one of the ways we do that is by reading from a Sefer Torah, by knowing the notes and reading it properly, despite the fact that it's only the letters themselves. Aside from the fact also the letters are conduits of, for light, etc. But so are the nekudos, so are the vowels too. That's all part. The vowels are a very integral part of the whole system of Kabbalah and the building of the world. But the same thing is true of Torah in general, that you have to supply that. You have to think into the parshiyot. Just because the Torah doesn't tell you what's going on emotionally doesn't mean you should look at the medrash and see what's really going on and what's really being said and what's behind the scenes. You have to do that. And you have to do it for two reasons. One, because that's the way you're mashlim Torah, you add to the completion of Torah, and also because that's the way you get Torah and more of it. And as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you look at the Zohar in this week's parsha, it's absolutely remarkable what's going on, between Yehuda and Yosef and approaching him and everything, and it's all about what's going on in the spheres. So you just have to understand that you just can't fly through the parsha. And I think one of the biggest mistakes a person can make is doing their shnei nichach targum, is a mitzvah on men above the age of 13 to read each verse of the parsha twice with targum ankelis and with Rashi. You can do one or the other, but ideally both of them. And to wait until the day of on Shabbos morning, or to do it also with the Baal Korah, which is, it's good to do it anyhow because you should be paying attention the entire time through, but you can't really think about it very much when you're going at that pace. So people split it up an aliyah a day. to have time. I know personally that's the way I do it. The Gra also did it that way. And the beauty of that I find is I have time to think about what's going on and to feel it more and get more insight into what's going on in the Parsha, in which you can ask questions, that I otherwise wouldn't pay attention to or think about. And that's a very important part of what's going on in this week's Parsha because these Parshiyot, probably more than any other Parshiyot in the entire Sefer Torah, have to do with redemption and how redemption happens and how we can participate in the process of redemption. And one particular point that I would like to focus on, because it's in the Sefer that I have here, that and it has to do with the Parshiyot. We're coming up for Hanukkah. That and Yehudas's studio was dark and mine is light and bright, so we're going from the dark to the light, right? That this idea of what we call the Ayelas Shachar. The Gemara, the Yerushalmi speaks about that, and Chazal pointed out, but it's interesting. We have a different times of the day of different, for different halachas. When can you start saying the morning prayers? When is it officially the end of night? When is it officially the beginning of day? Is there an overlap? We know there's been a shmashos, between the end of the day and the beginning of the next day. There are halachas that govern that period of time during the week, and also Erev Shabbos in terms of what you can do, can't do, and likewise between night and the morning. There's halachas, and one of the things we have is called Amud Shachar. Literally, we translate it as the morning pillar, the morning light. It's the moment in the day or the night that goes over to the next day. Basically, it's the beginning of that. We don't really consider it to be the next day officially until a little bit later on. There's halachic hours. A halachic hour is measured not by an hours of a clock, but it's measured by you take the time between, according to the Vilna Gaon, between sunrise and sundown, and divide that by 12, and whatever it works out. So obviously in the winter, the hours are smaller. They're less than 60 minutes. In the summertime, the hours are longer than 60 minutes, halachic hours. And that determines when you can say different prayers at different times of the day. But it's called Amud Shachar, right? The morning pillar, because morning is but to begin. But the word Shachar means black. Shachor is black. So really it's Amud Shachar is the pillar of black, right? And Shacharis, which is morning, right? Not Shacharis is morning, right? Daven Shacharis is the morning prayer. So you think about Shacharis as being a time of light, but the word Shachor is the root of that, which is darkness. Because we know that the darkest time is right before it starts to get bright. The night gets darker, darker, darker. It's very simple. Why? Because the earth is rotating, and it's going up further and further away from the sun. One side gets pulled away, and just before it comes around again, where it can start, having sparks of light. So it's going to be the furthest, the farthest away from the sun in terms of like the other side of the earth, and therefore it's absence of sunlight, and therefore it's darkest. But then it comes around, and as it starts to come around, and the light starts, to appear on this side, you get what's called, the tzotze, sparks of light. And eventually it becomes sunrise. I daven nates every day, Baruch Hashem, for the most part, which means it's sunrise, and you step into Shmona Esrei at sunrise, which means you start davening earlier. So when I go to shul in the morning, it's still dark. It's still quite dark. It's nighttime, although you can start saying certain blessings at that time, and by Amud Shachar you can say others, but it's dark. It's night. And I remember at the Kotel was particularly enjoyable when I used to go before Corona. I used to go once a week to the Kotel for nates as well, and you would close your eyes at the beginning because the sun would come over the Kotel, so it was behind that Har Zaytim over there, and it would be pretty dark still because the sun's being blocked. You could still you could see the lights coming up, but it's still quite dark. You close your eyes at the beginning of Shemona Esrei, and then you open them at the end of Shemona Esrei, if you can do that, and all of a sudden it's day. Like it would be dark when you started, and then 20 minutes later, 15 minutes later, it's bright and it's day already. And sometimes you can watch the reflection. But the point is, this is the way the day works. The day works where it's darkest right before it starts to get light again, because that's the curvature of the earth and the system that we're living within. But this, Chazal say, is the whole concept, the whole symbol of redemption. And we see that in this week's Parsha. It happens to Yosef, and it happens to Yaakov, and it happens to the brothers, right? Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, the revelation of Yosef as the viceroy and the savior in the end comes just after the moment that they were the most desperate. Yehuda approaches Yosef. On one hand, he's humbling himself and saying, listen, we can't go along with this because our father could never withstand losing Binyamin. Take me instead. The situation, we give up. We act. On the other hand, they say he was ready to go to war if he had to against the Egyptians and fight to the death. And they were very powerful people. Miracles could have happened. We saw it happen in Shechem, right? But it's like literally desperation, absolute desperation. They have no solution. They cannot possibly see how they will get out of this. And Yosef pushes them to this point. The truth is, he really wants to go even further, but he can't. Had he been able to, so they say that would have been the redemption, but they couldn't because the brothers couldn't take it. They just couldn't go any further. And then he says, and the Yosef, and boom, the light, the sun rises. The darkness is over. But it was so dark just a moment ago. How many times in life do we have a situation where it's like it seems hopeless and you're desperate and you don't know what to do next? I mean, there's a klal in the Gemara that says that God makes the refuah before the makkah. So just because you can't see the solution to your problem doesn't mean that God doesn't have one or that it's not coming. You just can't see it. So therefore, in your mind, it's dark. I can't see how this is going to be resolved. God hasn't shared that with me yet. Doesn't mean, though, that it's not on the way. And all of a sudden, something happens. Yeah, unexpected. I mean, once it happens, you can trace back. I guess it was always in the work. I didn't know about it. That's all irrelevant. How God works, because God could have let you know about it. He could have about it earlier. Could have said the situation. Everything that happened to keep it away from you until the precise moment that you became aware of it was hashgacha pratis. And all of a sudden, boom! It's like the situation that was so like impossible and desperate, right? Light. And you know that feeling? Wow! It's like you don't even have to think about it. It's like being wrapped up in the warmest of blankets and filled with love and all kinds of. It's like you're overwhelmed with the goodness of the moment. And this also happened, of course, to Yosef. Yosef was put in jail, and it goes from one jail. If he's in prison, he goes to another jail. Meaning that he had to work for Potiphar, and the wife accuses him, and ends up in jail. Paro's jail, and he speaks to the wine steward and says to him, remember me. Mention me to Paro. He doesn't do that, so he spends 2 more years in jail, seeming in a place that there's just no hope. I mean, Egypt was not a place for him to get by and to survive. It was amazing that he had survived as well as he had until that moment in time, but now the situation was completely desperate. And what happens? Like literally, he's sitting there. He has no news, no idea what's going on, no idea whether he's ever going to get out, what his family is doing. I mean, the situation is literally hopeless. And then, boom, they show up one day and say, quick, get dressed, shower. We're going to shave you and prepare you. You're going to the king. You're going to talk to the king. It's like one moment I'm a prisoner. I'm a nobody. I'm literally hopeless with no connections. And the next thing, I'm being taken out to talk to the president of the country. And who knows where that's going to go. And then you talk and you become viceroy. It's like nafachu, just like Purim. It's like literally the hafachu. Everything just gets turned around completely. Not just like change the direction. You're going this way, and all of a sudden you have like a 25-degree change. That's also significant. That's also exciting, but it's not so dramatic as 180-degree. And a lot of it has to do with psychology. 100%. When the fear, a lot of it's in our own minds, based upon our assumptions, what we believe. But God does that. He sets it up that way to make us think what we think, to make us believe what we believe, so He can save us in the end. So this template, this prototype, so to speak, of geula is a thread and a theme that runs all the way through creation, all the way through history. Why? Why does it have to be that way? Why does it have to be that the darkness has to come before the light? Why can't just go straight forward and God just make it happen without any distraction or disturbing time? Why do we have to always suffer this darkness first before the dawn? Why must there be the why does it have to be like that? So the answer is I'm not sure. Sorry. At the end of this year. I just wanted to ask a question. But there are some ideas that are important to know. The truth is that even if we don't really understand the method, we do understand the means. In other words, we see the effect that it has on us. There are certain rules that we have been told that we live by that run the world clearly. Now, what God really thinks and what he really has planned, the Leshem explains, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is on Mount Sinai. He says to God, so show me your face, show me your glory. I want to understand. And the rabbis explained that the question he was really asking was, why did bad things happen to good people? And why did good things happen to good people? And why did good things happen to bad people? And why did bad things happen to bad people? But it's interesting because the only question we usually ever have is, why did bad things happen to good people? Because logically speaking, it shouldn't, according to the way we understand things. The fact that good things happen to bad people also bothers us, but that's more to do with the fact that he doesn't deserve it. So why should he get it? Okay, whatever. But the tzaddik, he should be protected. So lots of answers. That question doesn't even really exist. I mean, the Gemara talks about it, but the reality is that hashkafically, there's so many different ways to explain it. But Kabbalistically, you have to understand and appreciate that when God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, I can't answer your question. No man can see my face and live. No man can see my face because no man can see my face and live. That's what it says. What does it mean? It means that basically God says that the reason for everything, for the way things are, you'll understand one day. I'll show to you maybe in your Mashiach, Techiyas HaMeisim, certainly in the Olam Haba, as you go higher and higher and higher and become more spiritual once again. Had we remained in the Garden of Eden and not been kicked out because of the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, then maybe we'd already know it, but we didn't. We got kicked out instead. And we've muddled our way through history and stumbled through all what has occurred. And we have a lot of questions, but the answers to most of those questions, for the most part, are on a level that are beyond our grasp. So you can try to apply logic to history, the Leshem explains, and where you can, do. And it's helpful. But you have to understand that there are things going on in history that are beyond our grasp, beyond our understanding, and we see what that leaves us with. What are we left with? If I can't explain things, in fact, if you had to pinpoint one of the main things that the Greeks did to us, that how they impacted us, to this very day, and maybe even more so today than ever before, is they've been so pragmatic, so used to explaining everything and making it all work out, that we don't even need faith in God anymore. We don't even need to trust God so much anymore for the process. Because we explain it. Even financially, once upon a time, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, if you didn't have money, you didn't have money. You didn't have something to barter, you didn't have something to barter. That's just the way it was. And the person went poor, maybe even starved to death. Today, a person can be without money, but they have credit cards. If they have credit cards, and they can have 5 credit cards, and they can use all of them and max them out and run from Gemach to Gemach to try and pay them off, or go to the bank and get a loan and push it off to later on. So we have other solutions. People only really turn to God today when everything else fails, even though we should be doing it way earlier the entire time. But that's the nature of the world. That's the impact the Greeks had on us. But the main thing that we can contribute, as the Gemara says, everything is in the hands of heaven except the fear of God. I mean, in other words, everything that happens in history is also mentioned in the Medrash. It's all been laid out. Going back to the beginning, nothing is happening. Nothing has happened. Nothing will ever happen that will be random. That will not have been planned since Ma'aseh Bereshis, even the Holocaust. All of it. Oh, well, that raises a lot of questions, and it does. It doesn't necessarily raise the answers, but it raises a lot of questions. And then you can write them down because you can ask them to God later on when the opportunity comes around. But the essence of what the darkness means to us, that is the time to increase your emunah and your bitachon. Yosef is in jail. It's dark. He understands it's ashkacha pratis, but he tells the wine steward and says to him, he says, I don't belong here. I was stolen, and he makes it seem like God wasn't involved, as if God would have stopped it. They didn't, for whatever reason. So it's unjust. And the wine steward, this is a guy who's trust and faith in God. God runs the world. He's a tzaddik. He's supposed to believe in God. It's all, you don't have to get the whole backstory. Just say, it might be hishtadalus, if you don't mind, mention me to Paro if you can. I helped you out here. Help me out too. But to go through the whole story, so he spends 2 more years in jail to realize that God's the one who's doing all of this. This darkness, God did it. He's making it happen. But the most important part of it is that the fact that there is such darkness means that light is just around the corner. So I read something, for a second, the Sefer. It's a whole section here, right? But this particular point comes out here as well. And he says the following thing. Let's find exactly. He says like all over the place here, but he says the Amar. So he's bringing down. He said, okay, beges Rasha yidlak ani, right? With the geus, with the pride and of the evil person, that will light the poor person. It's a pasuk from Tehillim. Okay, what does it mean? Discussion. Husad gadol. This is a major principle. A major principle. He says, what is it? Ki bifnei zeh ha'or gadol shemizgal b'rishona. In the beginning of every redemption, there'll be a little bit of light. God will, we spoke about this weeks ago, Pekida, Zechira, two different phases of the geula, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, right? But you have to understand, in the geula process, for example, people would like to have believed that in 1948, when the Jewish people got back to state, however they got back to state, that was going to be the final redemption. But it didn't happen. It was a redemption, an aspect of redemption. We got back to land. Even if it was secular people, it's highly significant in Jewish history, given the divine providence. But it didn't pan out to be the final redemption. We have a secular government. It does not run by Torah. We have war going on between two groups of Jewish people, secular religions, but there was a light. And then it goes dark. And you see the world today, from a Torah perspective, people support this cause, this, but the bottom of the Torah is the Torah. Torah is the blueprint for creation. Everybody else can ignore it and think that they have a better idea about how to do it. But the reality is the Torah dictates how creation should look, just like any blueprint dictates how a building is going to be finished in the end, because you follow the plans. So the story of how it's supposed to unfold is all based upon how the Torah tells the story and what's built in the Torah itself. So the fact that it gets dark means, by definition, not that God has given up and God has walked away and the situation has become completely hopeless and has no resolution. On the contrary, he goes on to say that because there's an increasement of light, because the light of redemption is allowed to shine, to spark a little bit, it's going to bring a response of darkness as well. Because there's two sides. For the sake of free will, there's good and evil. And they're at war with each other, either through people, conceptually, but they're at odds with each other. So the fact that the light came out is like, a cat with its back against the wall, because it knows that wherever the light's going to be, the darkness can't be. So therefore it fights back, and fights back with a vengeance, he says. These are the lower levels of the Sitra Achra, which is the characters of the Satan usually, right? And as a result of that, chutzpah will increase. The Gemara says that one of the signs in Sanhedrin and of Sota, it gives signs how you know that we're in Ikvin Mashiach, means like literally the end of the process of Mashiach's coming. He's inevitable. He's just around the corner. He's going to, right? Can't see him yet? Fine. But How do you know? Because if it's that dark, if the world has become so distant from the reality of Torah, it doesn't make a difference that people don't believe in it. I mean, it does. I mean, meaning that it doesn't make a difference to the plan, right? People, it didn't come from Mount Sinai. God didn't really say it. Mitzvahs don't really count. And they can say all they want. People said the same thing in the flood too, and people thought the same thing before the Holocaust occurred also, right? But the plan will go through, and he says here that the very fact that there is such darkness, the very fact that things are so backwards, the very fact that there is such chutzpah. I mean, this is the language of the Gemara. The Gemara says if you see chutzpah become rampant, the people don't respect one another properly, and sons don't respect their fathers, and mothers don't respect the children don't respect their parents, and Talmid Chachamim are despised, and Torah, truth is despised, and people lie freely, and all these. He said, anticipate Mashiach's arrival. It does not say head for the hills. It does not say find it, purchase a deserted island somewhere and move there and start your own community. It doesn't say that. It says anticipate the imminent arrival of Mashiach, because these are the signs. The fact that it is the darkest at this time. Because of that, lights are in the corner. And this is the theme of these parshiyot. This is what Yosef was trying to tell his brothers. And and the truth is, even if we don't understand, we don't see how all this is true. Now, there's even not us, but even like the brothers. Yosef's giving all these hints to the brothers. He calls them spies, right? Just by the way, as a side thing, to show a side point I think is very interesting to point out is that in last week's parsha, in the Parshas Miketz, it says that after they capture or they bring them back cup in Binyamin's sack, and they bring them back before Yosef, and Yosef says to them, how could you take this cup when I use it to divine? I can know things even that are not in general. I can do it through divination. A person like me, in my position, he's really just playing with them, but he's saying that a person like me can do this, so why would you even take a chance? Why would you take the risk? So if you look in the verse, it says it's right in the maftir of Parshas Miketz. Look for the word kamoni. It's the last word in the pasuk, which means like me. And the nachesh, yenachesh, means the divine. It's in the same pasuk. It comes from the word nachash, which means snake, for a specific reason, right? And if you look at the word kamoni, so in the word kamoni, which is spelled chof mem nun yud, it starts from the mem, right, of that word, and you count back 2 letters, you get to a shin. If you count back 2 more letters, you get to a yud. If you count back 2 more letters after that, you get to a ches, which of course spells Mashiach in reverse. Now, that itself is significant. Even if you don't believe in this type of a thing, you don't hold of, you think it's random. But it's still interesting, and it's interesting for 2 reasons. One, because not just because it's there, and the odds of it being there are pretty slim, but it's there in a pasuk that also mentions the word nachash. That's also significant, because the gematria of nachash and Mashiach are the same. And why are they the same? Because nachash was what sent us out of Gan Eden. It was the snake that convinced Adam and Chava to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Hara. And as a result of that, we were exiled. But it's Mashiach who's going to reverse that. So it's reversed in the pasuk, right? It's reversed. He's going to reverse that and allow us to overcome what the Nachash began and fix it and go back once again to paradise and Yemos Mashiach. So the fact that they're both in the same verse is highly significant, and the odds of that, given the background to both words and what they mean in terms of each other, makes it even more amazing that it's there. But what's it doing there? Is Joseph trying to communicate to his brother something by this embedded code, so to speak? Were they supposed to figure that out? They didn't even know it was Yosef yet. How would they even figure out? Wait, he must be saying something in code to us. Let's sit down and write this pasuk out over here, what Jesus said, and you count back all this. It can happen. No, but we can do that years later, because the Torah is saying to us, the brothers figured it out. They worked it out. Eventually, they spoke it out. When Yosef finally revealed himself, they had plenty of time to talk about it with Yaakov. and amongst themselves what they were doing and what he was thinking and what's the process to bring redemption and why he said this and why he said that. So then it was all revealed. To figure out in advance, not likely. But us, that's our job. We can figure it out because the Torah is speaking to us and specifically to our generation, because we are, as the Vilna Gaon said 200 years ago, so much more so today, Dor Basra'ah. We are the final generation. We're so close to the end, according to the Zohar, according to the Leshem, according to ideas, according to Kama things, which you can all. I've written about this in several books already. So it's going through the whole thing all over again right now. But because of that, here we are. We need to know, and we're living amongst tremendous darkness. And people talk about this day after day. It's crazy. It's crazy today. It's crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy. How can they think like? How can they do this? And people are still living with the old way of thinking. The older people are watching the world change and scratching their heads and going, "This doesn't make any sense." And what people are saying, what they're feeling, what they're doing, and how they're reacting, it's like pre-World War II, with the pre-Holocaust. Every day, people watch the world change in ways they just couldn't fathom how it was possible. How did Hitler rise to power? How did he become chancellor? Okay, well, he didn't know, but still, how the world allow it? How did Chamberlain not see what was coming next? How did Roosevelt stay in the war for so long? And as a result of that, how? So many hows. Until eventually the whole thing explodes and becomes World War II and all that takes place. But right after that, we get back Eretz Yisrael. I'm not saying that's the price we want to pay. I think if God asked any Jew and said, you can have back the land after thousands of years, but it's going to cost you 6 million souls, nobody would think twice and say, no, thank you. We'll make do without it. It was our choice. It wasn't really our choice in the end. That's just the way it happened. But clearly, that's what happened. The Holocaust ended, it's a period of time and a major price to pay, but in the end, we got back the land and we built it up on the way to the final redemption. Does it make sense? Not to us, but we see it happen. That's we'll have to ask God why that way, particularly. Good questions, but the darkness that He says here, elsewhere, you have to understand. It's like it doesn't work the way in the weather. You see this big, massive, dark cloud come. You don't expect the sun to come out after that. It's usually at the time to run for your rain boots and your umbrella. My friend told me, if you want to stop the rain, so if you want to start the rain, if there's ever a drought, you want to start the rain, get a car wash. The best way to get the rain to come. But when it comes to geula, that's the way it works. It gets dark, 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 and then finally light. And that's what this week's parsha says, and that's what we're going to find out in Mitzrayim also in the end. And that's why we have to take the time right now not to run and hide, but instead to prepare ourselves for the light that's about to break forth. And it's a hard thing to believe in. It's a hard thing to accept. It's a hard thing to take to heart, because we've been living in exile for thousands of years now. And our generation especially has grown up in a particularly confusing period of time. One of the reasons why is because, life has been so liberating. We've been very fortunate. So aside from the fact that some people don't even want Mashiach to come because if they think it's going to ruin their lifestyle, it's just that we're not biblical in our way of thinking. So Mashiach is more of a concept than reality. You have to change that. You have to take that idea to heart and go to this foreign and become real with the idea. Because as much as we are just a continuation of generations past, we're also very different from them. It was real to them. They didn't merit to live long enough to see it happen, but our generation is. And therefore, we have to make a point of working on ourselves and preparing ourselves for that burst of light, because you don't want to be unprepared when it finally happens. We should merit it, B'ezras Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi. And I hope we can continue this on this topic next week, because it's really fascinating and we all have lots of questions. I know I do. I remember one time in a shiur you gave, it reminds me of you saying how when in this parsha, especially, Yosef Hatzadik reveals himself to his brothers when he says, "Ani Yosef," and it's they're all shocked and they're all amazed and they're all embarrassed and all the other things that go along with it, and they can't believe they've been living a lie basically. And I think you said in a shiur or two that it'll be a similar situation at the end of days.
Yes,
When Mashiach
because
says, Mashiach, can you speak to that a little bit just before you go?
yeah, well, basically the Medrash says that all that happened to Yosef will happen to Tzion.
Uh-huh.
Now, Tzion, the gematria of Yosef and Tzion are the same. Kabbalistically, there's a very strong connection between Yosef and the whole concept of Tzion in the spheres. But basically, Tzion is the name that the Nevi'im used to use to refer to the Jewish people in redemption. You know, like in the perfected state. That's Zion. We're all looking forward to Zion, Tzion. You know, Heart Zion. That's the final stage of Jewish history as we enter the Mashiach Messianic era. So it doesn't say what all that will happen to the Jewish people. It will happen to Tzion. And what's Tzion? Tzion is something that we see historically does not always work straightforward. And the same way that Yosef was misunderstood, misperceived. And then he said, Ani Yosef, and everybody was shocked that he, in fact, was what he said he was. Likewise, well, the geula, Tzion, right? It's Israel today, the development, of the state, together with Torah growth in the land itself. Yeah, there's lots of backlash, lots of things going on here we don't like, need to be fixed, and Mashiach will take care of that as time goes on. But in 1 second, Hashem can cause massive tshuva. In 1 second. People who are so anti, boom, 1 second they become, always, think it reminds me of the story of Uri Zohar, right? For those who don't know who Uri Zohar was, he's now no longer with us. He was Moshe Tzaddik. I didn't know him before he was religious. I met him after he was religious, but the story they tell of him that he was like the Israeli Johnny Carson, right? He was Mr. Entertainment. He was funny. He was likable. He was on talk shows. He was in movies. And he had such a follow you can't believe. And he did not like religion at all. He didn't believe in it. I think he was an atheist. I think he's a proclaimed atheist. And as it happened, he tells the story himself in his book. As it happens, he was invited to a friend's son's bris, which he went as a friend, nothing religious. And there he got into discussion with somebody, and they got into an argument. And the argument led to another argument, which led to another argument, which led to another argument. Eventually Uri Zohar basically dropped off the map, and he became an Orthodox Jew. And when it finally came out, you look at the pictures of him later on; they look nothing like the ones when he was younger. You can still see them, in the social media. But like people were going to kill themselves. They looked at him as an anchor against religion. And when he turned around and became religious, it literally shattered people's images of a good life and all the things they thought that secularism stood for went down the drain with him in a sense. And then he spent the rest of his life in outreach, trying to reach as many Israelis as possible to bring them back. And his work is legendary, and his accomplishment, great speaker, entertainer. He still uses talents for the sake of Torah. And it's a rare story. There are stories like that in history, but it's a rare story. There's a couple here and there. Most people become Baal Tshuva. They weren't that much before they began. It didn't become that much after, so they're not famous necessarily. His story was a real famous story, and as a result of that, you learn. You can see how an impossible situation where people could be so against it, and with the right moment, the right time, turn around. So Hashem can do that. He just has to open the mind that when he decides to finally shoot that light down, in a moment, people are going to recognize the truth and realize what has to be done. So Tzion is a perfect case in point. It would have been nice to have a state formed in 1948 that ran itself by Torah governments. That would have been wonderful. And then everyone said, oh, look, this proves the redemption is here. Let's all become Torah Jews and live, according to the way the Torah is supposed to say, and the world get fixed. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. But you have to merit that, the Vilna Gaon says. Because if you don't merit that, it has to come through a backdoor means, the Fulah Sitra Achra. But the trouble is that Hashem has done such a good job of fooling the wrong side, there's fooled so many people on the right side too, who have done exactly to Tzion what Yosef's brothers did to him. Classic verse. This is a verse that I believe is such a fundamental verse of Jewish history. It sums up in one verse. David HaMelech wrote it about himself. because he went through the exact same thing Yosef did and Sion did, right? Exact same thing. Rejected. He wrote, Evan Masu Boinim Haisa La Rosh Pina. The stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone. What does that mean? What is that telling you? What's that warning you about? You better be careful, right? You better be careful. Before you go judging Sion and Mashiach and things like that, you better be careful, because the joke might be on you in the end. You may despise it right now, but it may end up being the very thing Hashem is using to build the redemption. So at the end of days, all of a sudden, Sion will stand up and say, I need Sion. Huge, monstrous collective gasp. We had no idea. Whoa. Right? So thanks for reminding me of that point.
That always stayed with me for years and years. Thank you for giving us so much chizuk and so much hope, and giving some big insight into this parasha. This is for all of history, the classic story of all the Jewish people through history. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you next week, Rabbi. Everybody have a good Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbos. Thank you, Rabbi, so much for joining us.